Welcome to the Get in the Fight podcast. My name is Nate Whitson, and I'm the founder of Get in the Fight Ministries and our exclusive online fight club for Christian men. Everything we do here is dedicated to helping Christian men become the men that God meant for them to be. So if you're looking for helpful content and conversations that can help you to grow and become the man that God made you to be, then you're in the right place. But before we get started, please do me a huge favor and be sure to subscribe, click the like button, and then leave us a 5-star review. Doing that helps us to reach more men who are looking for content just like this. Also, if you'd like to learn more about our mission and how to get involved or how to join the Fight Club, then head on over to getinthefight.club. That's getinthefight.club and learn more today. But without further ado, it's time to get in the fight. So let's go. Hey guys, welcome to the Get in the Fight podcast. My name is Nate Whitson and I am the host of this show. And if you're new to it, if you're stumbling upon this or maybe somebody sent it to you, we are a podcast designed specifically with a Christian man in mind. Our mission, our goal is to help Christian men live bigger, better lives. It's what I want for me. It's what I think God wants for all of us as men. And we want to become the men that God meant for us to be. We spend a lot of time thinking about topics and ideas and content geared around this idea that God created you and I as Christian men with great purpose and great value and great need for the world that we're in today. And unless you're living under a rock, you realize that the need is even greater than maybe any other time for men to become men that God meant for us to be. And so if that's you, welcome. Or if you know somebody, maybe it's a friend at church. If you're a woman listening to this and you're married to a man or engaged to a man and you want to encourage him, you want to help uplift him and inspire him to become that man, do me a favor and then just simply copy and paste the URL and send it to maybe your social media or maybe send it by email or text to your friend or to your community. That'd be awesome. So the more you do that, the more men we can reach. And we appreciate that. So today we're going to talk about something that's been on my mind for a long time. And I would be curious to get some feedback from you as you're listening to this, just to see, I guess, if maybe you have thought about this as well. I'm curious to find out. And I kind of have a sneaky suspicion that what we're going to talk about today is something that maybe you have also wrestled with or wondered about too. Have you ever thought that as you get older, as you look backwards, you start to think, gosh, the generation that is currently the young people of today, they're screwing things up. Like they really just, they're missing some things that were right and good and healthy. And I kind of wish things were like they were back in the good old days. Have you ever felt that way? You know, it's funny, like at one point we were that young generation that our parents' generation thought was definitely screwing up, and their parents thought for sure that their generation was screwing it up, and on it goes. And so we have to give some grace there because we too were in that stage at one point. But I think we all probably sense that things are way off. At least that's my sense. It's at least what I definitely think is true. Things are way off, and there are some things that we are missing in our world today that life would be better if we would re-embrace them. Life would be better if we actually went back to some of those good old days and did things different. You know, it's like the older you get, the more you are prone to say, back when I was a kid, right? Back when I was a kid, people used to fill in the blank. Well, that's the thought that's kind of been driving me for quite some time is back when I was a kid, it seemed like things were different. In fact, you know, even past my generation, I'm 46 at the recording of this, born in 1977, 80s kid, 90s kid growing up. I'm sure that my parents and their generation have stories of back when I was a kid that were way different and probably would have been good for us to embrace during my childhood. But we're going to kind of go back into some of those things. What are some of those things that back when you were a kid or back when your parents were a kid that people used to do that would be really good for our world if we all started to re-embrace them? That's where we're going today. And I want to give you 50 ideas, 50 things that I think would make the world a better place in 2024 and beyond if Christian men would lead the way. If Christian men would re-embrace these 50 ideas and made them normal again, I think the world would be a better place. We wonder sometimes, well, like, what can I do? What impact can I make? What difference could some nobody like me make? Well, imagine the cumulative effect if Christian men embraced what we're about to discuss here. And so we're going to remember back to some of those good old days and talk about re-embracing 50 different ideas that I think Christian men ought to pursue this year. Let's look at number 1. Remember when men used to hold the door open for others? Do you remember when that used to just be normal? That a man would stand and wait for not just women, but women in particular, but for anybody. They were just a gentleman. And one of the things they would do is hold the door open. Remember when men used to do that? Remember when men used to offer their seat for somebody else? When you were at a table or in a restaurant or in any public function, it would be just a normal thing for a man to stand up, offer his chair for somebody else. Such a simple thing, right? Do you remember when men used to do that more regularly? Do you remember when men used to give up their seat for the elderly or for pregnant women? Think about, like, we have a huge respect as gentlemen, as Christian men, for the elderly and for women. And what a simple way to just act like a man and give up your seat or make life better for somebody else around you. What a great thing. And I remember when that used to be pretty normal. Do you remember when men would help someone with their heavy bags or luggage? Number 5, do you remember when men would write a handwritten thank you note to show their appreciation? That may not be a super common one that you saw a lot of, but just handwritten notes in general can make a huge impression. And it definitely used to be something that happened more than today in our technological world, for sure. Do you remember when men would say please and thank you regularly? Do you remember when men offered a sincere compliment to somebody else? Do you remember when men used to be good listeners during conversations? Do you remember when men would shake a man's hand with a strong handshake and look him in the eyes while talking? Do you remember when men used to say, I love you, to family and friends? Do you remember when men volunteered their time to help people in need? Do you remember when men gave sacrificially to their church? Do you remember when men offered a warm smile and a hello to strangers? Do you remember when men gave up their place in line at a store to somebody who only had a few items in their cart? Do you remember when men used to hold up an umbrella for somebody else who was walking in the rain? Do you remember when men returned lost items to their owners and didn't keep that stuff? Do you remember when men offered assistance to somebody who was struggling with directions? Do you remember when men used to visit the sick or the elderly in nursing homes? Do you remember when men got a group together to go caroling during Christmas? Do you remember when men used to pay for the coffee or the meal of the person behind them in line? Do you remember when men used to say Merry Christmas? Do you remember when men sent get well cards to people recovering from illness or went and visited them in the hospital and prayed with them? Do you remember when men used to help a neighbor in need? Do you remember when men used to walk a lady to her car and he opened the door for her, no matter what the weather was like? Do you remember when men were respectful and patient with customer service representatives? Do you remember when men respected other people's opinions, even when they were different from their own? Do you remember when men took their hats off when they went inside as a show of respect? Do you remember when men taught someone a new skill or a hobby that came easy to them? Do you remember when men told the truth even when it hurt? Do you remember when men honored the elderly and protected the innocent? Do you remember when men complimented another parent on their well-behaved children? Do you remember when men never missed church except for unusual circumstances? Do you remember when men supported local businesses and communities that they lived in? Do you remember when men pulled out their chair for a woman to sit down? Do you remember when men bowed their heads to pray? Hey guys, I hope you're enjoying the conversation so far. And if you are, please do us a huge favor and be sure to subscribe, click the like button, and then leave us a 5-star review. It only takes a few seconds to do this, but it makes a huge difference for us, and it helps us to reach more men who are looking for content just like this. Thanks so much for listening and helping us out. Now back to the show. Do you remember when men forgave others for their mistakes? Do you remember when men were respectful during sporting events as a player but also as a person in the stands? Do you remember when men treated people with respect no matter who they were or what they looked like or where they came from? Do you remember when men shared what they could with others? Do you remember when men offered to mow a neighbor's lawn or shoveled their sidewalk just to lend a helping hand? Do you remember when men used to say yes, sir, or yes, ma'am? Do you remember when men encouraged someone who was pursuing their dreams? Do you remember when men left an area better than how they found it? Do you remember when men would read books just for fun? Do you remember when men appreciated what they had and they were content with their lot in life? Do you remember when men weren't so angry when they were driving down the highway? Do you remember when men celebrated the achievements and successes of others? Do you remember when men weren't in such a hurry all the time? Do you remember when men stood for the flag and placed their hand on their heart for the Pledge of Allegiance? And do you remember when men honored God with their lives? Do you remember when men used to do those things? Let's do more of those things again. See, God meant for men and women who carry his name to look different than the rest of the world. As we're reading through in our devotional time in this ministry, we're going through chronologically through the Bible. And right now we're working our way through Deuteronomy. And Moses is reminding his people before they enter into the promised land right now that you were set apart. You were to be consecrated. This old-fashioned word to say you were set apart for a holy purpose. You are to look different. You are to not eat like everybody else. You are to not dress like everybody else. The nations around you, the pagan country, the pagan peoples that were doing life so different. You are not to be like them. You are not to worship like they worship. You are not to wear what they wear or talk like they talk. You are to be a people that are wholly separate and different. You are consecrated for holy purposes. God says, I have chosen you. I've brought you out of slavery and into the light. I have brought you to a land that is good and prosperous and right. And I now want you to be a kingdom of priests, a kingdom of men and women who live and look so different so that the world could say, who is this God that they're following? And worship and glorify him as God and turn to him for salvation. Now, when we look at a list of 50 things like this, again, you're probably not blown away by any of those. In fact, some of those I'm sure you're looking at and going like, I don't remember men ever doing some of those, and that's all right. But a lot of these things used to be just part of our world. They used to just be a part of our culture. And as Christian men, we have an opportunity to lead the way. We have an opportunity to be the ones that even though you walk into a store and everybody's head's down or they're in a device, that you can look somebody in the eye and simply smile and say, how you doing? Hope you're having a great day, right? Like whatever it is, like just being human is going to stand out because we are so disconnected from our communities and from other people. You can stand out by just giving sacrificially of your time and resources because it's just a neighbor in need, whether they are believers or not. You can stand out just by, saying Merry Christmas. You can stand out by being bold and courageous. You can stand out and be consecrated today just by simply being a man who's not afraid to say I love you to his family and friends and give big hugs to the men in his life. You can stand out for God and do amazing things just by living the way that God has asked us to live, being the man that God has meant for us to be. And so when you go through this list, I'm curious, like, what are the things that I missed? What are some of the ideas that used to be common back in the day that we've kind of lost our way with? I would love to hear your thoughts with that. I would love to hear any comments that you have and grow this list. But here's the challenge that I have for you in this very, very short podcast today. I want you to think through for yourself what's on your list. What are the things that when you say, gosh, back in the day, people used to do this, this, and this. What are those things to you that would make a big difference? What are those things to you that when you remember when it used to be that way, that you think, I wish people were more like that? The challenge for you is to be that way. The challenge for you is to go, gosh, if it's volunteering, then I'm gonna volunteer, because wouldn't it be so great if people volunteered like that again at church or in the community or whatever it is? Like, wouldn't it be great if men jumped on the school board and helped because somebody needs to, so why not me? Wouldn't it be great if, I was the one to lead the way by simply like serving in my house and my family more than I have before with a great attitude? Whatever it is, remember when things used to be done that way, and determine for yourself to be that kind of person, to determine for yourself to make that cool again, to make that normal again. Like there's many times where I think, gosh, it would be nice if people treated each other a certain way. It would be nice if we lived a certain way, if we slowed down and took care of each other, all these things. I think of that stuff a lot. And the only thing I can do is be responsible for me. The only thing that you can do is be responsible for you. Can one man change the world? I don't know. One man did. Jesus, of course, did. But he's asking us in the world that we live, in the tiny little town or the big town, wherever you're at in the world, that the people that are around you, do you make them better? Do you make the world a better place? Remember when things used to be that way back in the good old days, and re-embrace those today. That's our challenge. That's a short little, probably the shortest little podcast that we're going to have in this ministry, I'm sure. But it doesn't have to be more profound than that. Remember when things used to be that way. Embrace some of those things and make the world a better place, because you are the one to reintroduce and re-embrace those awesome things from back in the day. Hey guys, thanks so much for being here today and listening to the show. Please be sure to head over to the website at getinthefight.club. And before you go, if you haven't already, please subscribe, click the like button, and leave us a positive 5-star review. It makes a huge difference whenever you do. Have a great day. Go get in the fight.